Hey guys, thanks for joining me. And if you like what you see, please subscribe.
Hello, peoples. Welcome to Sharp Ends. I wanted to do a quick overview of if you're new to the knife world and you're just getting into the scene, where should you start? Choices can be overwhelming at this stage. You're just getting into it and you're thinking, I'm tired of having a knife that isn't really sharp. And maybe you had a friend who had a pocket knife that was screaming sharp and you were like, why is my knife never that sharp? Why is it open so much easier and so much nicer and there's so much more variations? Well, I'm going to try to answer some of those questions for you and point you, hopefully, in the right direction where you can start your own collection or at least get a better pocket knife than you otherwise would have. First off, just the basics of a knife. People often call these, what's the handle part, a scale. So scales come in a lot of different varieties. This is a Ontario Rat number 2, and this has a customized scale on it. So ignore this customized scale. It's aftermarket. That being said, there are a lot of aftermarket parts for the Rat 2, which make this a very good choice, first choice for getting a knife. It's fairly cheap, like in the $40 range, and maybe even cheaper depending on what knife steel you get. And it is built like a brick house. It has 4 spacers in the back. Knives are either going to have spacers like this, barrel spacers, or they're going to have a full back spacer like this guy right here in the center here. And that keeps the scales and everything aligned together and hopefully keeps your knife centered right. So this has 4 spacers, which is unusual. Most budget knives are going to have 2 spacers, and usually in the back. This is overbuilt for a reason. It's overbuilt so that if you're going to be going out in the wilderness with this and you need to, God forbid, baton a little bit, in other words, split some wood or some kindling with a knife, you could reasonably get away with it. However, this is a liner lock too. Liner lock being that it has this lock that engages when it opens all the way up and it snaps over. Some people think that this liner lock is overly engaged. Do you see how it's over 50% of the way on the knife steel? That's done on purpose in rats, and that if you do baton and misuse this knife, it's going to go over all the way over here and jam, and then you're just going to have a little fixed blade. If you try that trick with batoning and a liner lock, where the lockup is less than 50%, like it's at 25%, like over here, or less than 50, when this fails, this is going to fail in the open position and the knife is going to collapse and potentially hurt your hand. However, that's when you're misusing a knife, right? So I would highly recommend that for a first knife, there is absolutely no reason not to get an Ontario Rat. It will probably stay in your collection forever and you'll never sell it because it is a quintessential design and it is tested and proven, and it is cheap, but it is good. And then we have the Ontario Rat number 1, which is the larger cousin of this knife. This knife also has a liner lock and comes with, and you can get a lot of aftermarket scales for this too. So if you want to play around with it, you can. This knife is just bigger all around. It opens up really nicely. Both of these have thumb studs, which open. In general, this is going to open either with a finger flick, which is when you use your middle finger on the back side to flick it open, do the Spidey flick, or you're going to use your thumb to open it up. When you're learning how to flick a knife, you might cut yourself severely because you might try to be pushing this with the flesh of your skin and you don't get enough momentum up. And this knife will come flying out and then you'll end up pushing down on the blade with your thumb. That happened to me with a bug out when I was learning how to flick. My only advice is do it carefully and do it with your thumbnail, where what you're doing is you're pushing out like that. Okay? You're not trying to get it around. You're not pushing out this way. You're pushing up and away. Okay? Same thing with a Spidey flick. You're pushing it straight out and over around. The geometry between the thumb blade and the pivot is what causes the action to be really good. Action is how the knife opens and how it feels when it opens. There is a resistance you have when you're opening a knife, and that is caused on a liner lock and is often called detent, where there's a little ball, a ceramic ball, metal ball, some kind of ball in here in the liner lock that rides in a groove and fits in a hole. So when it clicks closed, it's inside of a little hole there. You have to build up enough pressure in order to open it. If you have to push really, really, really hard to get it out, that's called hard detent. When it takes very little effort to open, that's called soft detent. And then there's medium detent. Detent is not good or bad, whether it's soft or hard. People have personal preferences, but that aside, at least a medium detent in the middle is going to be a good option. I would call the rat middle of the ground and pretty good for that. Okay. A lot of budget knives, and this is a Magurin and another brand I would highly suggest you get into if you're just looking for a cheap knife that has high quality machining and features for such a cheap knife. This Magurin has a lot of that. This is oh god, this isn't the Morol. I forget the name of this one right now, but this is a phenomenal knife. The name will appear right now. This is Centurion. This is a Centurion. Very nice. G10 scales. It comes in a couple of different colors, and they're textured, and it also comes with a milled clip. When I say milled clip, I mean this was a solid piece of metal here, and a machine came in here and cut away the excess. When I say that it's a bent clip, what I'm talking about is a piece of flat metal that was bent in a machine to go on here. And this isn't bad, but it's more prone to catching on something and bending out. And then you're going to have to rebend it or get a new clip. A machine clip is going to be substantially better, but on budget knives, hardly ever found. That's one of the reasons why I like Magurin so much. This method of opening is much easier for beginners. This is called flipper tab. Sorry, flipper tab. And it has some jimping on here. When I say jimping, I mean it has these little ridges cut out here. And when you push down like that, when you do a light switch action to it, it comes shooting out. The detent, again, because this is a liner lock, is provided by that little ball and provides the resistance. This also, you will notice, has thumb studs, which are also fun to deploy. So in a way, this can be deployed multiple ways. However, with this particular model, it's almost impossible. Well, it's not impossible. It's harder to finger flick this one. But it actually is pretty good, honestly. So Magurin, check them out. I would suggest the Morol or the Centurion for your first Magurin purchase. I like them a lot, although they come out with a lot of stuff and they're always coming out with new models, so they're fun to look at. This one also has a couple of different finishes on here, which are pretty cool. So this one has like a stonewash finish, and then it also has a belt grind finish here, and it has this nice swedge up here. It has a nice choke up point. This is called the coil. Your finger can fit here, and you can choke up on it by putting your finger on top of the knife as well. So that's pretty good. So flipper tabs are nice and easy. And then we have a different kind of lock mechanism I just want to talk about briefly. This is the Sencut Serene, absolutely banger of a knife. Nice little flipper tab. You can also push button flipper tabs, whereas you just push in rather than flick down. This one has a button lock that engages, and then you just push this button and it closes. This is running on bearings. So some knives run on washers and some run on bearings. This one has a bearing action, and bearings aren't necessarily good or bad. It just depends on how they're made. A nicely tuned knife with a bearing on it, something like, all kinds of knives, but like this has a more hydraulic feel to it. Although you can flick open, and there are several knives that are made well enough that you can flick open a washer knife very easily, but this is a Chris Reeves knives, definitely not a budget knife, not something you're going to buy anytime soon if you're a beginner, but it has a very nice washer action to it. As does something like the Quiet Carry Waypoint. This is running on bearings, or on washers, but the action is super smooth, and you can still flick it out easily. So Sencut, very cool knives, different kind of colors here, blah, blah, blah. Next, you should check out CGARB and see if there's anything. This is the Echo, and this Echo is a knife designed by Ray Laconico in collaboration with them. It is a very nice knife, and there's lots of CGARB offerings, which are great knives, and you should certainly check them out. Interesting feature about this one is no thumb studs. It has a hole or a spidey hole or a flick hole, whatever you want to call it, and you can flick it open with that. That knife I tried to fix, and I ended up making it harder to open, but here's a knife that has a spidey hole that you can easily open, right? And people call it a spidey hole or a flick hole or whatever because it comes from Spyderco. Spyderco is not necessarily a budget knife. However, it's usually the gateway. Usually you start getting basic knives and then you move on to something like a Spyderco, uh, just to throw that out there. Next is Kaiser. I don't have many Kaisers. This is Urban Bowie. Kaiser is a great company for basic knives, especially when you're getting into knives. This is the only example I have because I've sold a lot of my other ones when I've upgraded my collection. But I should just mention that Kaiser, also a great, great company to go to when you're thinking about starting on this journey. Finally, I need to mention knife steel. So budget knife steels, there's high-end knife steels, and a lot of time when you're spending a lot of money, you can be paying for the name, you can be paying for the design, you can be paying for the knife steel, you can be paying for a lot of different factors that go into the knife. Knife steel is one of the fundamental ones usually in a design that controls the price. In the budget range, and I'm going to say less than $50, you're talking about something like D2 or something that I would call alphabet soup. If you see something that says 8CRV 16 8CR 16M, I can't remember the last part of it. That is a very basic knife steel, and hopefully you're paying even less than $40 for that. In general, what I'd say is when you're getting a knife steel that's basic, I would go with either Artisan Cutlery, in other words, CGRB, which is their basic brand. Try to look for 14CR28N or D2, which is a fine basic budget knife steel. Those are the two primary ones I would send people to. It's just my opinion. There's also, yeah, I would say those are the two budget steels you need to look for, is 14CR, 28N, or D2 are probably the best two knife steels. And then there's also, I was saying CGRB has their proprietary steel, which is, what is it? 9CR, 9CR RPM, something like that. I can't quite remember what it's called, but their proprietary steel is powder metallurgy and is absolutely a good budget steel knife too that they make in-house. When you hear someone saying, is it PM, powder metallurgy, what they're saying is that they've taken the steel and they've put together a bunch of fine particles together, and those fine particles make a nicer grain within the steel, and that keeps the knife doing better, okay? Why do you care about knife steels as a beginner? Because the better the knife steel, the sharper it will stay for longer, and it might have some qualities like not breaking and being easier to sharpen or less easier to sharpen, and those things work on an axis with each other. When you get up into some of the super steels or better steels like S90V, which is a CPM steel, this is very tough, stays sharp forever, and is really hard to sharpen. In general, that's what you're going to find. Things that are going to be harder are going to be harder to sharpen, but they will keep an edge longer. Other things that as a beginner to watch out for is, where do you buy your knives? There are several different places that are reputable knife dealers. I started out on basically two different sites, the Knife Center and I'm blanking on the other name of the other big one right now. But those are where I started. Now I pretty much stick to either Smoky Mountain Knives, or I love DLT Trading Company as well, and then buying directly from the manufacturer. A lot of the budget knives, it's best just to either get them on Amazon or to go ahead and go directly to their website and try to get them there. But you can also support some of the smaller businesses by checking out knife dealers as well. One of the secrets of finding a knife that's out of stock is going to the website themselves, and even if they're out of stock, go to their licensed dealers and then click through and search all their dealers till you find someone that still has it in stock. And if they're a licensed dealer and they're on the manufacturer's website, you can trust that they are a legitimate source to get them. In general, do not get a knife from Alibaba or Alibaba Express or any of those types of places. Just go ahead and ignore them because they make knockoffs left and right, and you're not going to get a legitimate knife most of the time. So if a deal is too good to be true, it probably is too good to be true. I think I've given out a lot of information, which is going to be good for a basic intro. I absolutely am aware that I have not given an expert lecture on knives and that I've left a lot out. I've done that on purpose because I think that if you're just getting into the knife world, the information I gave you is enough to get started on. And if you want to learn more, watch more of my videos, watch other people's videos. But you will not make a mistake by going off of the recommendations I have given you, I hope. If you've enjoyed what you see, I would really, really appreciate if you like and subscribe. And if you want to support the channel, you can use the links below, and you can also become a Patreon member by following the link below. Thanks so much, guys, and I'll see you next time on Sharp Ends. Bye-bye now.